Welcome back, riders. I finally got my hands on an all-wheel drive fat bike, and this was a one-way trip. I've always been very careful never to fluff my first impressions and review videos with over-exaggerations, doing my best to convey a bike's features, performance, and limitations in such a way that if you were to watch my video and then ride the same bike, it would hold up to your expectations. So, taking that into consideration, I hope you can grasp the weight of the following statement. I cannot go back to a one-wheel drive electric bike.
Oh, man. That's a stump. Okay. Reasonable ground. Not as bad as I thought it would be, I'll admit. But that's still brutal.
Targeting riders who prefer traction and torque over pure speed, this bike matches up to me quite well due to a combination of my lazy riding style, poor road and trail conditions. And it might be appealing to others who enjoy this kind of riding as well. This is the MC3 from Mooncool. At the time of recording, the bike cost $1,400. This price point is not going to change many minds about the value of an e-bike, but most may want to reconsider their options when comparing it to anything else in this bracket. As always, I'll be covering what I like, what I think can be improved, and how this particular bike's details affect real-world riding conditions. But first, I want to focus on the details of two-wheel drive bikes in general, both for practical and enjoyable riding. There are, of course, the obvious differences, but stick with me, because until I actually rode one, I didn't realize how much of an impact they would have on the bike's capabilities. Many of these go hand in hand, but have different effects in different situations. Maneuverability. In tight spaces at low speeds, the rear motor by itself will often be fighting against sharp steering angles. In most cases, this will simply stall the motor, causing you to lose momentum and balance, then drop a leg. Even on bikes with powerful rear motors, the straight line force can overcome traction in the front and throw you off your line. Adding a motor to the front wheel allows the bike to pull you around tight turns at low speeds. Gone are most situations where you'd be forced to put a foot down and aid the bike. The bog and float. Getting bogged down on a bike can be caused by many different scenarios, but more often than not, the front tire has been pushed into soft ground or overwhelmed by debris. Again, adding the front motor changes the state of the front tire from being pushed into everything to now climbing over anything it contacts. This has a dramatic effect on off-road performance and ride feel, giving the bike a floating sensation as it's quite literally climbing over everything it touches instead of running into it. Traction and stability. Most noticeable on gravel roads where bikes tend to get squirrely due to the front tire wandering, both minor and major adjustments in your line feel far more planted as the traction from the front is now active rather than passive, always pulling you in the direction you want to go rather than digging in or sliding out. You'll likely find the same effects on stability in sand and snow, but those aren't something we have much of around here, so I wasn't able to test it. On that note, I wouldn't push it on ice because that's a different animal altogether. In two-wheel drive, the bike has a strong, almost snappy tendency to self-right and balance on its own. When entering a turn, I find myself adding more lean than I normally would. The difference is strong enough to notice during your first couple of rides, but I'm not sure if it picks up in the video. It's never been a hindrance, just a dynamic of the two-wheel drive system, with the end result being a tighter overall feeling during sharp turns. Thermal loading. Admittedly, I've never pushed an electric bike as hard as the MC3, mainly due to limitations. I'm sure some of the bikes I've tested could make it out here, but it wouldn't be nearly as fun, practical, or safe on the electronics. In the best case scenario, when an electric bike begins to reach its thermal limits, it'll start to throttle performance, providing less and less power until it cools off. In the worst case, smoke and fire if the thermal protection has been modified, damaged, or simply never existed in the first place. Placing two motors on the bike instead of one large motor allows for better cooling by separating the coils and doubling the surface area. In cool environments, the added drag and weight from the second motor may not be as efficient as one large motor when it comes to relaxed riding, but in hot environments, as well as any situation where you know you're going to push the bike hard, better cooling should cause fewer lost miles due to cooler wires creating less resistance. The all-wheel drive system also uses two speed controllers, one for each motor. This is nice for the previously mentioned reasons, but also has the added benefit of redundancy. If you were to fry one motor or controller, you can bypass it with the flick of a switch and still get home. These are the major advantages of a two-wheel drive bike that I've noticed, but there are some more minor benefits, as well as a few downsides that we'll touch on as I share my first impressions of the MC3. Looks are subjective, so you can make up your own mind. This is the army green step-over version that I personally think looks good and fits in with its surroundings. The frame is available in a step-through design as well. Cosmetics run into a bit of a hiccup due to complications with cable management and welds that look fine, just not too clean. The integrity of the bike feels as strong as most others I've tested, but thanks to the MC3's capabilities, a few components could use some upgrades. Using similarly spec'd parts that you'll find on many other fat tire bikes, the MC3 is at a bit of a disadvantage, simply because of where and how you'll likely want to ride it. And to be clear, these are parts that would be an issue on anything I've tested so far, had the other bikes also been two-wheel drive. Tractoring through tall brush and climbing over stumps while assuming the trail is around here somewhere is one of the most enjoyable experiences I've had on two wheels to date. Dead serious, it is so much fun. Definitely something that I'll keep doing so long as the MC3 allows it. However, it's already taken a toll on the bike, mainly in the form of whacking logs that I couldn't see and bending spokes with random branches. The current tally marks are 2 bent spokes and 1 broken kickstand that I was going to remove anyways. I'm lucky to still have a derailleur, but I don't expect that to last much longer. As for the kickstand, I could care less because in these conditions it only gets in the way and was never going to last anyways. That being said, I would like to see thicker 12-gauge spokes and a derailleur guard. Thankfully, Mooncool has provided us with the spoke length for the front and rear wheels. I'll have them down in the description, so I'll be upgrading those as they break. An important aspect of any bike with a front hub motor is to use heavy-duty dropouts and forks. When installing the front wheel, it's equally as important to follow the instructions 100%. Failure to do so will turn your bike into a unicycle rather quickly. It's nice to see Mooncool did their part and gave the bike a beefed up fork with extra thick dropouts. As a happy side effect, the thick fork tightens up the ride and provides nice dampening. No rebound dampening, unfortunately. Given that these forks appear to be designed specifically for hub motors, I would have liked to seen a dedicated run for the motor wire. My biggest fear by far is snagging the cable on a branch and ripping it out of the hub. I may try to get creative, but for now, I'll just go ham on the zip ties. My guess is Mooncool may not have realized how people would ride this bike the moment they realized what it could do. This may actually be why you don't see many, if any, two-wheel drive bikes at this price bracket. By their very nature, they're going to be ridden harder, and stuff's going to break more often. They did have a bit of foresight when choosing tires. These have slightly taller and more aggressive tread than your run-of-the-mill 4-inch fatties. With the beefed up forks and front motor, the bike is heavy. Due to how it handles under its own power, I only notice when I get off the bike and have to lift it up a few steps. A sacrifice that's well justified in my opinion. On that note, be prepared to replace the front tire more often than the rear. You can mitigate front tire wear with good weight distribution, but I find it more fun to just relax and kick up a few rocks. To bring an all-wheel drive bike to the market at the same average price point as other 4-inch singles, some sacrifices had to be made. Luckily, they seem to make them in good places, offering most of these as accessories you can purchase down the road. No rear rack or fenders, so out of the box you will get dirty, wet, and not carry any cargo. Offering these as an upgrade was a good choice, because I only see them getting snagged on branches where I'm taking this bike, but other riders may want them. Another sacrifice was a slower 2-amp charger instead of the standard 3 you get with most e-bikes. This just means it's going to take longer to charge, but you can always upgrade this yourself down the road, especially if you plan on getting the second battery. The taillight is not integrated or rechargeable, but at least it's not a button cell. It runs off of 2 AAAs, and it has a gyro to sense when you hit the brakes. Its running brightness is okay, but gets extra bright during braking. I'd still recommend a second, brighter taillight on your backpack or your helmet. The headlight is bright enough to get by, but like most e-bikes, needs to be upgraded or supplemented. Because I'll be using this bike for short to mid-range fun rather than daily commuting or max range travel, I'm not devastated by the lack of a USB charge port, but it is one corner that I'm sad to see cut on any electric bike. The MC3 is a 48-volt bike that comes with a 14.5 amp-hour battery. I feel this is a little small for a two-wheel drive bike, and I do have some concerns about how well it'll handle pulling 40 amps when maxing out both motors on longer trails. Granted, I've yet to find any situation where I would need to hold full throttle for more than a few seconds. If you know you're going to push this bike hard, I highly recommend spending the extra $170 on the second battery. This runs in parallel with the frame pack and will nearly double your range while taking half the load. Installing the second pack was plug and play thanks to the bike already being wired up for 2 packs. Operating the bike at cruising speeds in two-wheel drive produces twice the motor noise, making the bike more noticeable for anybody trying to stay under the radar. Kicking the bike into one-wheel drive still has enough power to hold top speed on smooth ground, but won't do much to reduce motor noise because you're still spinning 2 clutches. At lower trail speeds, the bike is relatively silent and can easily slip by unnoticed. Sadly, they could have done a better job truing the wheels. Yes, I can fix it myself, but you can both hear and see the wheel run out when you reach about 20 miles an hour as the bike bobs up and down. I did my first week of testing with the single pack and found it could take me 8 miles out, 2 miles down a harsh trail, then 8 miles back home with 1 bar of battery left under load and plenty of torque, plus about another half mile going back down the trail looking for my broken kickstand. A bit of mild pedaling on the return trip just to make sure I'd get home, but it didn't need it. I can safely say one battery will get you a solid 20 real-world miles under its own power, so long as you're not gunning the throttle every chance you get. They included a 3-way switch on the bars that allows you to switch from front, rear, or all-wheel drive, and I'm glad to see it. Granted, I spend most of my time in all-wheel drive. I'm glad to have this switch for the redundancy we touched on earlier. Originally, I thought there might be some benefit using only the front motor in very tight commuting situations, but I don't have the balance to take advantage of it. And without the rear tire to catch the front, I can't see any other reason to only use the front unless you're a god-tier fixie bike rider. The step-over model has a recommended rider height of 5'8" to 6'2". At 6'4", the bike is a little small for me, but these recommendations seem to have the biggest impact on riders who intend on pedaling a lot, something I'm not too concerned with on the MC3. I'll likely add some lifted handlebars and a Zoom suspension seat post to not only aid in better fitment, but also to help soak up some of the hard impacts on my back and take some stress off of my knees. Getting into the user interface, we land on a setup that has potential but needs better optimization. The push-pull trigger shifter is my favorite as you don't need to adjust your grip to change gears, but it's nullified by a number of reasons. Had Mooncool opted to go with a full grip instead of a thumb throttle, a few of these issues would have been solved. I normally enjoy thumb throttles on e-bikes, but for bar space and off-road handling, I'd rather have a full grip throttle. Thankfully, the bike has cruise control, and it uses a button on the display to activate instead of forcing you to hold the throttle steady for a random number of seconds, meaning it will never turn on when you don't need it and always turn on when you want it. Out of the box, they place the throttle next to the display where you can't hold both at the same time. The bike does allow you to set cruise control while pedaling, but then you're stuck with the limited, non-customizable pedal assist speeds. I decided to move the throttle to the right side of the bars and relocate the shifter. Because I don't pedal the bike much, I'm okay with this sacrifice, but I'll look into a full grip throttle soon. It's nice to have full power at the throttle in all pedal assist levels, but unfortunately the throttle does not take priority and is completely ignored when you start pedaling. Depending on what level you're in, this will either cause the bike to jump up or drop down in power at the worst times. It's such an annoyance that I'll be disabling pedal assist.
My chain still works? Yeah, we good. You cannot help this bike at low speeds. You want to assist it on some of this stuff, even if you have the control, balance, and stability to do so, which I really don't. The moment you start pedaling, it's going to jump you. It's going to try to jump you up to about 10 miles an hour, which means it's going to give it full throttle on both motors. So low speed operations with the pedal assist are pretty much non-existent. The throttle's got plenty of resolution, so dealing with this stuff, no big deal. But if you do find yourself in the boggiest of situations and you try to help the bike, just be ready for it to give it all it's got.
The display is monochrome or liquid crystal, whatever you call these, and I prefer it over color displays because it's easier to read in direct sunlight. The backlight was blinding me at night, but I was able to turn it down in the settings without affecting daytime visibility. For its size, it gives a fair bit of information. Speed, battery level, and odometer are a given, but it includes an active power bar, voltage readout, and current sensor. Note, the current sensor and therefore the active power bar only read from the rear speed controller, so be sure to double those numbers when in all-wheel drive. Due to the lack of customizable pedal assist levels, I only found 1 through 4 to match up well with the bike's freewheel, giving a comfortable cruising cadence between 10 and 18 miles an hour. The bike has more climbing power than any other I've tested so far, but I would still like to see a lower first gear to aid the bike on the steepest inclines. Out of the box, the bike comes set up as Class 2 with a top speed of 20 miles an hour and 25 when unlocked. Neither slow nor fast for its class, they opted for better torque instead of top speed, and that was the right choice if you ask me. However, I would not recommend unlocking the bike's top speed unless you're running 2 batteries because of the added amp draw. The brakes look to be of generic quality. They are hydraulic, were properly adjusted with no rotor rub, provide good performance and feel, so no complaints here. The shifter was properly adjusted as well, snapping quickly through all gears. As I summarize my first impressions of Mooncool's MC3, please keep in mind this is the first two-wheel drive bike I've ever ridden, and I'm looking at it through the eyes of an adventure rider, not too concerned with using it as a commuter. With that said, it makes every other electric I've tested so far, regardless of price, feel boring. That statement might not make very many bike manufacturers happy, but after riding two-wheel drive, I can't go back to a single. The first time I saw an electric fat bike years ago, my mind immediately began to ask, why don't they just add a second motor to really take advantage of those big tires? And I'm excited to say, it's even more fun than I thought it would be. The added power and traction was a given and does not disappoint, but the added maneuverability makes boggy trails feel so much less daunting. Something as simple as knowing you don't have to drop a leg around every tight corner and that you can just climb over piles of branches in your way without fighting the front of the bike is a massive advantage. Hearing it said probably won't hit home until you try one for the first time, but all-wheel drive on a bike goes such a long way in reducing fatigue out on the trails. With the MC3 being priced in the same range as so many others, even with the second battery, it begins to unjustify everything else in this bracket. I'm just gonna say it. If you want a fat bike, look into something with two-wheel drive. It's so much better. In my opinion, Mooncool did not cut any important corners on the bike. There are some improvements to be made, but nothing deal-breaking. You can look forward to my follow-up review on this bike in a few months. I do hope it holds up because it is my current favorite electric. But it's going to be pushed harder than the others, so we'll see what happens. So I hope you guys got some useful information out of today's video, or at the very least were mildly entertained. And until next time, ride safe.
Now all that was fun and probably looked really cool, but you know, it doesn't mean much if we have to struggle to get back up this hill. See how it does. Bottomed out the fork there. It took a good bit. Alright, power getting up that hill was not a problem. There were very few moments where I was giving it the beans. It was limited mostly by me, which was good. Ooh, what's this?